Bullies tear the quiet girl's clothes in front of the team. They had no idea she was the captain's little sister. Maya Rodriguez clutched her worn backpack straps tighter as she navigated the crowded hallways of Westfield High School, her shoulders hunched defensively against the chaos swirling around her. At 17, she had perfected the art of invisibility during her 3 months at this new school, keeping her dark hair pulled forward to shield her face and her eyes downcast to avoid unwanted attention. Her petite frame, barely 5'2", and naturally quiet demeanor made her an easy target in a place where confidence seemed to be the only currency that mattered. The move from Phoenix had been necessary after her father's job transfer to this small Texas town. But Maya missed everything about her old life. Her close-knit group of friends who had known her since kindergarten, her familiar routines at Jefferson High, where she had been respected for her academic achievements, and most importantly, the anonymity she had enjoyed there. Here at Westfield, she stuck out like a sore thumb with her second-hand clothes from the thrift store downtown and her timid nature, a stark contrast to the confident, well-dressed students who seemed to own these halls with their designer jeans, expensive sneakers, and effortless social grace. What none of them knew, what Maya kept carefully hidden behind her walls of silence and isolation, was that her older brother Diego was the star captain of Westfield's championship-winning football team. Diego Rodriguez was a local legend, a 6'3" powerhouse who had led the Eagles to 3 consecutive state championships and was being courted by colleges across the nation. His name was spoken with reverence in the hallways, his jersey number painted on car windows throughout the town, and his leadership on and off the field had made him the kind of student that teachers adored and parents held up as an example to their own children. Diego had specifically asked Maya to keep their relationship secret when she first arrived at Westfield, not out of embarrassment or shame, but because he wanted her to make friends and establish her own identity on her own merit rather than simply because of his popularity and status. He had seen too many students try to befriend his previous girlfriends or teammates' siblings just to get closer to the team, and he wanted to protect Maya from that kind of superficial attention. Maya had agreed readily, thinking it would be easier that way, believing she could navigate high school politics on her own terms. But she hadn't anticipated becoming the primary target of the school's most notorious bullies. The ringleader was Jake Morrison, an 18-year-old senior with artificially bleached platinum hair, cold blue eyes, and an attitude that made even veteran teachers look the other way rather than deal with his disruptions. Jake came from one of the wealthiest families in town. His father owned the largest car dealership in 3 counties, and his mother sat on the school board, which gave him a sense of untouchability that he wielded like a weapon against anyone he perceived as beneath him. His loyal followers, Connor Walsh and Brett Stevens, were equally unpleasant, but lacked Jake's cruel creativity and social connections. Connor was a tall, lanky boy with acne-scarred cheeks and a mean streak that emerged whenever he felt the need to prove his loyalty to Jake. Brett was shorter and stockier, with the kind of aggressive demeanor that suggested he had learned early that intimidation was easier than genuine social interaction. Together, the 3 of them had made Maya's life absolutely miserable with their daily torment, always careful to strike when no teachers were around and no authority figures could witness their systematic campaign of harassment. They had developed an almost artistic approach to cruelty, timing their attacks perfectly to maximize humiliation while minimizing their own risk of consequences. It had started small during Maya's first week at Westfield, accidentally bumping into her in the hallways with enough force to send her books scattering across the polished linoleum floors, making loud comments about her thrift store fashion that echoed through the corridors and drew snickers from passing students, and laughing whenever she dropped her pencil or stumbled slightly on the stairs. But as weeks passed and Maya failed to fight back or report them, their harassment had escalated into something far more sinister and personal. They would wait for her by her locker every morning, surrounding her in a triangle formation that made escape impossible, while they peppered her with questions about her family's financial situation, her father's job as a maintenance worker at the local hospital, and her mother's position as a house cleaner for some of the same families whose children attended Westfield. They would knock her lunch tray out of her hands in the cafeteria with perfectly timed accidents, causing her carefully prepared meal to explode across the floor in a spectacular mess that drew stares and laughter from nearby tables. The humiliation of these incidents had caused Maya to start skipping lunch entirely, preferring hunger to the daily dose of public embarrassment. In the gymnasium, they would position themselves strategically during physical education classes to accidentally hit her with volleyballs, basketballs, or dodgeballs during activities, always with enough force to sting, but not enough to seem intentionally violent to the distracted PE teachers. Maya had learned to flinch whenever balls came her way, and the resulting bruises on her arms and legs had to be hidden under long sleeves and pants, even on the hottest Texas days. They cornered her by her locker between classes, making cruel jokes about her slight accent that still carried hints of her family's Mexican heritage, mimicking her soft-spoken voice with exaggerated impressions that drew cruel laughter from students who gathered to watch the daily show. They would comment loudly about her appearance, pointing out every perceived flaw from her carefully mended clothes to her naturally curly hair that she couldn't afford to style professionally. The psychological warfare was perhaps even more damaging than the physical harassment. Jake had a talent for finding exactly the right words to burrow under her skin and stay there, commenting on her loneliness, her obvious poverty, her isolation from her classmates, and her complete lack of social connections. He would wonder aloud why someone like her even bothered coming to school, suggesting that maybe she should just drop out and get a job cleaning houses like her mother. Maya endured it all in stoic silence, biting her tongue until she tasted blood, clenching her fists in her pockets until her nails left crescent-shaped marks in her palms, knowing that Diego worked incredibly hard to maintain his scholarship opportunities and his team's respect. She couldn't risk causing drama that might affect his future, especially when college scouts from major universities were already showing serious interest in offering him full rides to prestigious programs. Every time she wanted to tell him about the daily torment, every time she considered asking for help, she remembered the pride in his voice when he talked about potentially being the first person in their family to attend college on a full scholarship, about the opportunities that could change not just his life, but their entire family's future. Their parents worked multiple jobs to keep the family afloat, their father pulling double shifts at the hospital while their mother cleaned houses from dawn until dusk. And Maya knew that Diego's success represented hope for a better life for all of them. She couldn't be the selfish little sister who ruined everything because she couldn't handle a few bullies. She convinced herself that she was being strong, that her silence was a sacrifice worth making for the greater good of her family's dreams. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon in late October when the entire school was buzzing with excitement about the homecoming game that evening. Westfield was undefeated for the season. Diego had been featured on the cover of the local sports magazine, and college scouts from Texas A&M, UT, and Oklahoma were expected to attend the game. The hallways were decorated with streamers in the school colors of navy blue and gold. Students wore face paint and spirit wear, and there was an electric energy in the air that made everyone walk a little taller and speak a little louder. Maya had been trying to slip out early through a side exit to avoid the crowds and the inevitable pre-game festivities when Jake and his friends cornered her near the gymnasium entrance. It was the worst possible location for an encounter. The area was packed with students, team members, cheerleaders, band members, and dedicated fans all gathering for the massive pep rally that would kick off the homecoming celebrations. Parents had arrived early to claim good seats. Local media representatives were setting up equipment to cover the event, and even some college recruiters had shown up to observe the atmosphere surrounding their potential recruit. "Well, well, look what we have here," Jake sneered, his voice carrying easily over the noise of the crowd as he spotted Maya trying to edge around the growing mass of people. Little Maya, trying to sneak away from all the fun and school spirit. Maya kept walking, her heart rate accelerating as she recognized the familiar predatory tone in his voice, but Connor stepped directly into her path with his arms crossed while Brett moved smoothly to block her other escape route. Students around them began to notice the commotion, some pulling out their phones to record what they sensed might be entertaining drama, others gathering closer to get a better view of whatever was about to unfold. "Where do you think you're going, scholarship girl?" Jake continued, his voice now loud enough for everyone in the immediate area to hear clearly. "Don't you want to stick around and support our amazing football team? Oh wait, I forgot. Your family probably can't even afford the $5 ticket prices to get into the game tonight." Heat rushed to Maya's cheeks as nervous laughter rippled through the growing crowd of onlookers. She tried to step around Connor, but he grabbed her backpack with both hands, yanking her backward with enough force to make her stumble and nearly fall. The crowd pressed closer, sensing that something entertaining was about to happen, and Maya felt the familiar panic rising in her chest as she realized she was trapped. "Actually, you know what?" Jake announced to the crowd, his grip tightening on Maya's arm as he held her in place. "I think Maya should show some real school spirit today. Maybe if she dressed a little nicer, tried a little harder to fit in around here, she might actually make some friends instead of skulking around like some kind of ghost." Before Maya could react or even understand what was happening, Jake's hands shot out and grabbed the front of her favorite button-up cardigan, the soft blue sweater that had been a Christmas gift from her grandmother back in Phoenix. With a sharp, violent yank that sent a shock through the crowd, he ripped it open, sending small pearl buttons flying across the concrete in every direction. The thin fabric tore easily under the force, leaving Maya standing in just her plain white tank top, exposed and humiliated in front of what felt like half the school. The crowd's initial reaction was a collective gasp of shock, followed by a moment of stunned silence as everyone processed what had just happened. Some students began pulling out their phones to record, others started whispering urgently to friends, and a few seemed genuinely disturbed by the escalation of what had started as typical bullying into something that crossed clear lines of decency and consent. But the reaction Jake had expected, laughter, entertainment, social media content, never materialized. Instead, the atmosphere in the crowd shifted rapidly from anticipation to something far more dangerous. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The roar came from Diego Rodriguez, who had been walking out of the locker room with several teammates after their final pre-game meeting, when he witnessed his little sister being assaulted in front of dozens of witnesses. His face was a mask of pure, undiluted fury as he pushed through the crowd like a man possessed, his massive 6'3" frame cutting through students like a bulldozer, his hands already clenched into fists that looked capable of serious damage. But Diego wasn't alone, and that's when Jake's situation went from bad to absolutely catastrophic. The entire starting lineup of the football team emerged behind their captain, Marcus Thompson, the 6'4" defensive end whose arms were as thick as tree trunks. Antonio Rivera, the lightning-fast running back whose speed was matched only by his fierce loyalty to his teammates. Kevin O'Brien, the team's massive center who weighed nearly 300 pounds and had never lost a fight in his life. James Washington, the quarterback whose leadership skills extended far beyond the football field. And 8 other players who had just witnessed someone sexually assault their captain's family member. The change in the crowd's energy was instantaneous and terrifying. Students who had been laughing and recording moments before now backed away quickly, sensing the dangerous shift in atmosphere as they realized they had just witnessed something that was about to have serious consequences. The football players at Westfield weren't just athletes or local celebrities. They were genuinely respected members of the community. Many of them had grown up in rough neighborhoods where disrespecting someone's family was a serious offense that demanded immediate and decisive response. And all of them had spent years learning to work together as an unbreakable unit. "That's Diego's little sister," someone shouted from the crowd, and the information spread through the gathered students like wildfire. Jake's face went white as he processed this information and realized the magnitude of his mistake. He released Maya's arm immediately and tried to step back, but found himself surrounded by increasingly angry football players whose massive frames blocked any possible escape route. The crowd was growing larger by the minute as word spread throughout the school that something major was happening near the gymnasium, and the energy was becoming mob-like in its intensity. "You just put your hands on my sister," Diego said, his voice deadly calm as he reached Maya and gently wrapped his Letterman jacket around her shoulders with the kind of protective tenderness that made the assault seem even more heinous by comparison. "You tore her clothes off in front of everyone. You humiliated her in public for your own entertainment." "I didn't know she was—" Jake started to stammer, but his words were cut off by a chorus of angry voices from the football team. "You didn't know what?" Marcus Thompson interrupted, stepping forward with his massive fists clenched and his face twisted with rage. "You didn't know that you don't put your hands on girls? You didn't know that you don't rip people's clothes off? What exactly didn't you know, you piece of trash?" The crowd was growing larger and more hostile by the minute as news of the incident spread throughout the school. Students who had never spoken to Maya before were now shouting angrily at Jake and his friends, their voices joining a growing chorus of outrage. The football team's extensive fan base, which included many students' older siblings, parents, and community members, began pushing forward with expressions that promised violence if the situation wasn't resolved quickly and decisively. Connor and Brett had already started backing away from Jake, clearly wanting to distance themselves from their ringleader as they realized that this situation was spiraling far beyond anything they had anticipated. Several senior girls who were dating football players looked absolutely furious, their voices rising above the crowd as they called Jake disgusting and demanded that someone call the police. "String him up!" someone yelled from the back of the crowd. "Beat his ass, Diego!" another voice shouted, and soon there was a chant building among the students, demanding immediate and violent justice. But Diego held up his hand, and the crowd fell silent immediately. Such was the respect and authority he commanded among his peers. His eyes never left Jake's terrified face as he spoke, his voice carrying the natural leadership that had made him such an effective team captain and community leader. "You know what, Jake?" Diego said, his voice rising so everyone could hear him clearly. "I'm not going to touch you. I don't need to lay a finger on you to make sure you get exactly what you deserve." He turned to address the crowd directly, his voice carrying the kind of moral authority that made even adults stop and listen. "This piece of trash just sexually assaulted my little sister in front of all of you. He ripped her clothes off and humiliated her for no reason other than his own sick entertainment. But here's what Jake doesn't understand about my sister, what none of you know about Maya." The crowd leaned in, hanging on every word as Diego continued, his voice filled with pride and protective fury. "Maya is the strongest person I know. She's been dealing with trash like this for months without saying a single word to me because she didn't want to cause problems that might affect my scholarship opportunities. She's worked 2 part-time jobs since we moved here to help our family pay bills while maintaining a perfect 4.0 GPA. She tutors elementary school kids for free every weekend and volunteers at the animal shelter every Saturday morning, cleaning cages and caring for abandoned pets." Maya felt tears streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of humiliation anymore. They were tears of pride and relief and overwhelming gratitude as she watched her brother defend her honor in front of the entire school community, finally understanding that her months of silent suffering had been witnessed and valued by the person whose opinion mattered most to her. "She's been protecting me," Diego continued, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. "While I've been focused on football and scholarships and my own future, my little sister has been getting tortured every single day by cowards like Jake Morrison, and she never said a word because she was putting my dreams ahead of her own safety and happiness." The crowd's anger was reaching a fever pitch as students began shouting obscenities at Jake, and several football players were cracking their knuckles menacingly while taking steps closer to their target. Parents who had arrived early for the pep rally were pushing through the crowd, their faces dark with anger after hearing what had happened to a teenage girl in their community. Jake looked around desperately, realizing that his usual escape routes were completely blocked and that his social connections and family wealth meant absolutely nothing in this situation. Connor and Brett had completely abandoned him, melting into the crowd to avoid any association with his actions, leaving him isolated and friendless in the center of an increasingly hostile mob. "Look, I'm sorry, okay?" Jake pleaded, his voice cracking with genuine terror as he realized the seriousness of his situation. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just messing around, just having some fun. I didn't mean anything by it." "You didn't mean what?" The voice belonged to Mrs. Patterson, a mother of 3, whose eldest son played linebacker for the team. She pushed through the crowd with several other parents, all of them looking absolutely livid as they comprehended what had happened. "You didn't mean to assault a teenage girl? You didn't mean to rip her clothes off in public? You didn't mean to humiliate someone who was just trying to get through her day without being bothered?" The situation was spiraling far beyond anything Jake could have imagined when he first decided to target Maya that afternoon. What had started as his usual bullying routine had turned into a community-wide incident, with dozens of people calling for his head and demanding immediate consequences for his actions. Principal Martinez finally arrived with several security guards, having been alerted to the disturbance by teachers who had heard the commotion from inside the building. But even his presence couldn't calm the mob-like atmosphere that had developed, and his attempts to restore order were drowned out by the angry voices demanding justice. "Everyone needs to calm down," Principal Martinez announced through a megaphone, but his words were completely ineffective against the righteous fury of parents, students, and community members who had witnessed an assault and wanted immediate action. Maya watched in amazement as the crowd defended her with a ferocity she had never experienced in her life. Students she had never spoken to were shouting her name in support. Teachers who had barely acknowledged her existence were demanding that Jake face serious consequences. The entire social structure of the school had shifted in her favor within minutes, transforming her from an invisible target into someone worthy of protection and respect. Jake made a desperate attempt to flee, pushing roughly through a group of junior girls in his panic to escape, but found himself face to face with Coach Williams and several other faculty members who had been alerted to the situation and had positioned themselves to prevent anyone from leaving. "Going somewhere, Morrison?" Coach Williams asked, his massive frame blocking Jake's path, while his voice carried the kind of disgust typically reserved for the worst kinds of criminals. The crowd pressed closer, and Jake found himself trapped in the center of a very hostile circle with nowhere to run and no one willing to help him. His usual bravado had completely evaporated, replaced by genuine fear, as he realized that his actions had consequences that his family's money and social connections couldn't fix. "I want to press charges," Maya said suddenly, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. The crowd fell silent immediately, all eyes turning to her as she stood straighter, Diego's Letterman jacket still wrapped around her shoulders like armor. "Maya," Diego said gently, placing a protective hand on her shoulder, Are you absolutely sure about this? Once we go down that road, there's no taking it back. She nodded firmly, looking directly at Jake for the first time since the assault, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. He's been tormenting me for months, Diego, every single day. Today, he crossed a line that can't be uncrossed, and I'm done being silent about it. I'm done protecting people who don't deserve protection. The crowd erupted in supportive cheers, and several students began sharing their own stories of Jake's bullying behavior, creating a cascade of testimony that revealed a pattern of harassment and intimidation spanning multiple school years and affecting dozens of victims who had been too afraid or ashamed to speak up previously. Principal Martinez realized he was dealing with something much larger than a simple schoolyard dispute. With parents demanding action, students providing detailed testimony, and multiple witnesses to what was clearly assault, he had no choice but to call the police and begin the process of formal consequences. As sirens wailed in the distance, Jake's face crumpled completely as the full weight of his situation became clear. His parents would be called, his college applications would be affected, his reputation was destroyed, and his freedom was potentially at stake. The social power he had wielded for years was gone, replaced by universal contempt from his peers and community. The police arrived and immediately began taking statements from the numerous witnesses who had observed the assault. The entire incident had been recorded by dozens of students on their phones, providing clear and undeniable evidence of what had occurred. Jake was arrested for assault and harassment, his handcuffs drawing cheers and applause from the crowd as he was led away to face the consequences of his actions. As the immediate drama finally began to calm down, Maya found herself surrounded by supportive classmates for the first time since arriving at Westfield. Students approached her to apologize for not intervening earlier, to offer friendship and support, and to express their admiration for her strength and courage in finally standing up to her tormentors. The transformation was immediate and overwhelming. People who had ignored her for months now wanted to be her friend, to hear her story, to make amends for their previous indifference to her suffering. Diego wrapped his powerful arm around his sister's shoulders as they watched Jake being loaded into the police car, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the school colors everyone else was wearing. "I'm sorry I asked you to keep our relationship secret," he said quietly, his voice heavy with guilt and regret. "I thought I was protecting you, giving you space to be your own person, but I was actually leaving you vulnerable to predators like him." Maya leaned against her brother's solid presence, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying for all these months. "It's okay, Diego. I understand why you did it. You wanted me to succeed on my own merits, not just because I'm related to the star quarterback." "It's not okay," Diego replied firmly, his voice carrying the conviction that had made him such an effective leader. "Family protects family. That's how Mom and Dad raised us, and I forgot that principle when I should have been watching out for you every single day." The crowd began to disperse as the immediate drama ended, but the impact of the afternoon's events would be felt for much longer than anyone could have anticipated. Maya's status at school had transformed overnight from invisible target to respected member of the community, and the social dynamics that had seemed so fixed and unchangeable suddenly proved to be more fluid than anyone had imagined. Connor and Brett faced their own consequences in the days that followed. While they hadn't directly participated in the assault, their months of harassment alongside Jake had been witnessed by too many people to ignore. Students avoided them in the hallways, teachers watched them closely during classes, and their previous social standing evaporated as quickly as morning dew. They eventually transferred to other schools, unable to handle the constant scrutiny and contempt from their peers who had finally seen their true characters. Maya threw herself into her new social connections with the enthusiasm of someone who had been starving for genuine human contact. She joined the student tutoring program officially, becoming a mentor to struggling underclassmen who reminded her of her own feelings of isolation and confusion. She became involved in school spirit activities, painting banners for football games and helping organize fundraisers for various causes. Her grades remained excellent, but now she had friends to study with, people to eat lunch with, and support systems she had never experienced before. The homecoming game that evening became a celebration not just of the team's inevitable victory, but of the community coming together to protect one of their own. Maya stood in the student section wearing Diego's spare jersey, the number 12 proudly displayed across her back, cheering louder than anyone as her brother led the team to another championship-level performance. Every touchdown, every successful play, every moment of athletic brilliance felt like a vindication of her decision to finally stand up for herself. During halftime, Principal Martinez made an announcement that surprised everyone in attendance. He introduced new anti-bullying initiatives that would be implemented immediately, including mandatory training for all students and staff, and Maya's appointment to the Student Council Committee that would oversee their development and implementation. The crowd's thunderous applause made it clear that her transformation from victim to advocate was complete and welcomed by the entire community. As the semester continued, Maya reflected often on how dramatically her life had changed in the span of a single afternoon. She had learned that suffering in silence wasn't noble or admirable. It was dangerous and self-destructive. She had discovered that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness. It was an act of wisdom and self-preservation. Most importantly, she had realized that standing up for yourself didn't require violence or revenge. It required courage, community, and the willingness to trust that other people would do the right thing when given the opportunity. The incident with Jake became a turning point not just for Maya, but for the entire school culture at Westfield. Students were more likely to intervene when they witnessed bullying, understanding that their silence made them complicit in cruelty. Teachers implemented stronger monitoring systems and took reports of harassment more seriously. Parents became more involved in addressing these issues, recognizing that their children's social development was just as important as their academic progress. Maya's friendship circle expanded to include students from all social groups, united by their shared experience of that dramatic afternoon and their collective commitment to creating a more inclusive environment. She tutored football players in advanced mathematics while they helped her build confidence in social situations and taught her that strength came in many different forms. Her relationship with Diego grew stronger as they learned to balance family loyalty with individual independence, understanding that protecting each other didn't mean hiding their connection from the world. The college recruitment process became a family affair, with Maya actively involved in helping Diego evaluate his options and prepare for the next phase of his life. Coaches who visited their home were impressed not just by Diego's athletic abilities, but by the tight-knit family unit that had produced such a remarkable young man. Maya's own academic achievements began attracting attention from scholarship committees, opening doors she had never imagined possible. By graduation, Maya had become one of the most respected students in her class, known throughout the community for her academic excellence, community service, and quiet strength. She was elected class president in her senior year, a position she used to implement lasting changes in school policy and culture. Her college applications reflected not just her impressive grades, but her leadership in anti-bullying initiatives and her work with at-risk youth in the community. She gave the valedictorian speech at graduation, standing confidently at the podium where once she had cowered in hallways, addressing her classmates with the poise and authority of someone who had faced her fears and emerged victorious. Her voice was clear and strong as she spoke about the power of community, the importance of standing up for those who couldn't protect themselves, and the transformative effect of choosing courage over comfort. Her final words to her classmates were simple but powerful, echoing through the packed auditorium and leaving not a single dry eye in the audience. We all have the choice to be bystanders or protectors when we witness injustice. We can look away to protect our own comfort, or we can step forward to protect those who need our help. The difference between those choices defines not just what kind of students we are, but what kind of people we become, and what kind of world we create for the next generation. The audience rose in sustained applause that seemed to last forever. But Maya's eyes found Diego in the crowd, both of them remembering the frightened girl who had nearly been broken by cruelty, and celebrating the strong young woman who had emerged from that darkness with wisdom, compassion, and unshakable self-respect. Their parents wept with pride in the front row, understanding that their children had learned the most important lesson of all, that family means never having to face the world's cruelty alone.